Honourable Kieran McAnulty.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the earlier guidance. I've been reflecting on that. And I think it's true to say that this side of the House has honest MPs. That's right. Now, thank you for that guidance. I look forward to applying it further in future. The debate has not been a debate. Aside from Mark Patterson, who I actually think was a considered contribution, who addressed the details of this and explained why, in his view, this was necessary, all we've actually heard from the government side is platitudes. Now, if you put that to one side and looked at it in isolation, I actually don't think anyone in this House would disagree, certainly not from the Labor Party, because you disagree. You disagree with the fact that farmers are the backbone of the country, and you disagree that they are vital to our communities and that we rely on them in areas like where I live. That's very interesting to know, Tim Costley, MP for Otaki electorate. Very interesting to know indeed. The thing is, Madam Speaker, is if you actually look at the contributions from particularly the National Party MPs, they've used this debate as an opportunity to praise farmers, but haven't actually touched on the actual issue at hand. And the honest response is that I don't want to see agriculture in the ETS either, but is completely removing them out of it right now when the government hasn't got a plan in place to address it. Is that the right response? Well, my honest answer to that would have to be no. So if this was delaying this...
Point of order, Tim Costley.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I just wonder if in the spirit of the honesty of that side of the House that's been reinforced, perhaps the member could be given the chance to correct what he said for the hands out earlier about my reflection, which was that, as I think he probably heard, I didn't agree with his assessment of the debate, but I certainly would agree with farmers being the backbone of our economy.
Well, the member made an interjection, which was, I guess, read by the member making a speech, and I don't believe that the comment was misinterpreted at the time, so I'd invite Honourable Kieran McAnulty to carry on.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Now, if this bill was proposing that the deadline, so to speak, was to be pushed out, say, 3 years, as an example, I think there's a very good chance that there'd be a lot more support in this House than what there is tonight. Because actually there's a long history of that being the approach. If we think back to when the ETS was first brought in, there was a time by which agriculture could consider alternative options. That was pushed back, and then of course we all know through the Hiwaka Eke Noa process, an alternative to the ETS was trying to be found. Because at the heart of that, admittedly, it's now been sacked by this government. But at the heart of that was a recognition that if there is to be an alternative approach for agriculture, we as a parliament should support it. That's certainly the view of the Labor Party. Because essentially, our reputation and our contribution to the world determines the price that we can get for our products overseas. And that's what we tried to do with Hiwaka Eke Noa. I recognise the potential downfalls with that is the accuracy of the technology on recognising sequestration on farms, etc. That was a sticking point. But there was an opportunity there to get that right. I'm not sure that the overseas consumers that we as a country rely on and our primary producers rely on will be convinced by a promise that one day there might be technology. If this was pushed back, for example, for 3 years, they might demonstrate that, yep, we're still taking this seriously, but we're just giving the sector a little bit longer. Because it's not actually just the sector, it's the government. And the investment in technology, there's been some claims tonight, it's nowhere near as much as would have been if Hiwaka Eke Noa was in place. But that's not really the point of this. The point is that if you look at the free trade agreements that this country has recently signed, in particular the European Union, hugely beneficial to this country. However, only if we live up to our obligations on climate change. Now, they take that incredibly seriously, the European Union. They have set this as a priority for them. We know in many ways that where the EU is heading, other countries will follow, and free trade agreements will be updated and be reflected in that respect. And so what is concerning, Madam Speaker, is that today of all days, where we're debating this, the New Zealand has dropped 7 points in the climate index. That should be a worry for all of us, because our reputation determines the prices that our primary sector gets. And so I would put towards the debate that if the date in which agriculture enters the ETS was simply to be pushed out instead of scrapped altogether, we might be able to make those claims to those consumers, and I'm concerned we can't now. Now, that ultimately could have an impact on the price that farms get. That will impact regions like where I live. That will be a major worry. There's two sides to this debate, and so often it's a lazy, politically driven debate where fingers are pointed and labels are thrown and names are thrown that aren't accurate. This is too important for this country to simply have a debate that says we love farmers, they hate farmers, we love farmers. It's too important for that because it's not honest and it's also not accurate. I don't know why Simeon Brown's chirping up. This is a man who has been on fewer farms than Erica Stanford has called Jan Tinetti names. He has come from the heart of Auckland. He might be a member of the National Farm Party, and I recognise that they have farmers, but Simeon Brown is not one of those. Remember that time he stood on the side of the road with a shovel and pretended he would dig a hole? His shovel wasn't even dirty and his boots weren't even dirty. Look, I will take contributions from the likes of Mike Butterick, who I respect, and the other farmers in that, but I will not stand here and be chirped at by a bloke who's never even visited a farm. Madam Speaker, this bill is actually a missed opportunity for the large opportunities that are around. And I think that's a shame. And it's on that basis that we don't support this, not because of all the ridiculous and untrue statements that the other side have said, just because I think we're not looking at the bigger picture. Great.